Coming up next on Another View, candid conversation and lively discussion from two of the power brokers in the Virginia State Senate, State Senator Louise Lucas and State Senator Mamie Locke. This hour, we'll talk with these two African-American pioneers about their lives, political ambitions, the upcoming presidential election, and what we can expect during the next Virginia General Assembly. Plus, we'll analyze and reflect on the Act Now Symposium featuring the Reverend Al Sharpton. The three of us were there, and it was quite a rally. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. Another View is next, right after this news from NPR.
Discussing the issues and celebrating the successes of the African American community. This is Another View.
And good afternoon, everyone. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. Welcome to Another View. Just want to say that our hearts and minds and prayers go out to those folks in Aurora, Colorado, who are dealing with the tragedy that happened there overnight. The gentleman going into the movie theater and opening fire. 12 people are dead, we know, more than 38 injured, and we just think about them and think about what they're going through. And as President Obama said today, he said there will be other days for politics. This is a day of prayer and reflection, and we think that that's just sets the tone for what we need to be doing today. I am so excited because I have two people in the studio today to talk with that I've been wanting to talk to for a long time, and we're going to talk about politics with two pioneer representatives in Virginia State Senate, representing the 2nd District, which includes parts of Hampton, Newport News, Portsmouth, and Suffolk, is State Senator Mamie Locke. Hi, Mamie, how are you?
I'm great. Good to be here, Barbara.
Thank you so much for joining us. And from the 18th District, representing Emporia, Greensville, Nottoway, and Sussex, as well as parts of Brunswick, Chesapeake, Franklin City, Isle of Wight, Lunenburg, Portsmouth, Southampton, and Suffolk, State Senator Louise Lucas. Louise, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's good to be here today, Barbara. Thank you.
Now, we booked this show, I guess, about 6 to 8 weeks ago to coordinate all of you all's schedule. And at that time, there were supposed to be 3. And our dear friend, Senator Yvonne Miller, who recently passed away. And so, you know, it's kind of a bittersweet time for all of us to get together with her being here. Mm-hmm. What do you think?
Of course, I feel the same way. And I just haven't been myself for the last several weeks. In fact, Senator Locke and I both went and sat at Senator Miller's bedside. And those last moments with her, of course, were precious. But I tell you what, my heart is just so filled with just the memories that I have of her, and I'm just so saddened by her passing.
Yeah, I know. I saw her at the Community Engagement Awards that WHRO held, and as always, she always said to me, "Hello, gorgeous," and it was just I just used to love to hear her say that. Right. Senator Locke.
I mean, there were 3 of us, and we considered ourselves as the trio, the 3 amigos,
Exactly.
And 1/3 of us. You know, it's no longer here, but her memory will last forever because she made such an impact, not just on Norfolk and the 5th Senate District, but on the nation and on the state, because she was a first. I mean, she was a true pioneer and trailblazer.
And it's just as the two of you are, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But I do want to remind our audience also that one of the things that Senator Miller did was to hold the Math Bowl at P.B. Young Elementary School, which was the elementary school where she taught for many, many years. And she truly believed that our students, African-American students in particular, need to know the sciences, the STEM subjects, science, technology, engineering, and math. Right. Thank you. And so there is a scholarship at Wells Fargo Bank. And so anyone who might want to contribute to that scholarship to keep that program going, because there would be, I guess, about 40 kids or so who would participate in the Math Bowl, and they would win various prizes based on their abilities, and then she would take them shopping and let them spend the money anywhere they wanted to. So we want to be able to continue that legacy.
Absolutely.
So if those of you out there in the audience, if you are interested in participating in that, you can go to any Wells Fargo bank and just say it's for the Yvonne Miller Math Bowl. Okay, so let's talk about you two ladies. I want to know, first of all, I mean, both of you are firsts in that. Senator Lucas, you were the first African American on the Portsmouth City Council.
That is correct.
Correct, right? And Senator Locke, you were the first and only African American to be mayor of the city of Hampton.
That's correct.
And then now you guys are in the Senate, and you're the two only African American females in the Senate. Am I correct in that?
That's correct.
That's what I thought. All right. So what made you decide to get into politics in the first place? Both of you had careers prior to your political ambitions. I'm going to start with you, Senator Locke. What was the button?
There were any number of buttons for me. I was raised in Jackson, Mississippi, and had always been active in the community. I'm a child of the Black Power movement, and went to high school during that time, went to college during that time, and I was my undergraduate school was what we call a civil rights institution. Tougaloo College was actively engaged in the community, so much so that the state of Mississippi tried to starve them out. Martin Luther King came there. Stokely Carmichael came there. There were any number of people who came through that community to get people engaged. Students from Tougaloo College were part of the Woolworth sit-ins in that community. So going to that school was a big motivating factor. And then I was a political science major. And one of the things that I was taught as an undergraduate was you have to be engaged in your community. And so that stayed with me from the time that I left undergraduate school to when I went to graduate school in Atlanta and when I moved to Hampton. And my area of expertise was urban politics. So I would tell my students, you need to go to city council meetings, you need to go to planning commission meetings, because you need to know what's going on. And
it needs to start at that local level too, doesn't it?
Right. And I taught the theory, but never thought about the practical side of it, because I always said that I'd much rather talk about politicians than be one. And ended up being asked to run for city council in Hampton, and ultimately did that, and it kind of took off from there. Since 1994, I've been involved in politics.
So now you are that politician
that you used to talk about.
Senator Lucas, you were, of all things, a pipe fitter?
I was a ship fitter. I started at the Norfolk Naval Shipyard right out of high school as an apprentice ship fitter. I finished that program. And ironically, some of the things that happened at the Norfolk Naval Shipyard drove me into the area of civil rights. At about 20 years old, I got involved with NAACP. I worked on every committee in NAACP until I finally worked my way up to president. And I would go to city council so I could have information to bring back to my membership. And in the process of doing that, there were several issues that I felt were not being addressed by the members of the Portsmouth City Council, and one of them was the fact that they were not enforcing their own housing codes. And as you know, right now, Senator Locke serves on the state Virginia Housing Commission. So some of the things that we have done have been very closely aligned. And so with that, I went to council. I started talking about housing issues because a lady had fallen through the second floor of her apartment and had broken her hip. It was because one of the slum laws in the city, and everybody knew it, was not being forced to keep his properties according to the BOCA codes. And so when I started to go to council, and I went week after week after week, and then I became a part of the housing commission, then there were people who were saying, oh, she thinks she's the 8th member of council, if I recall correct. It was the mayor at that time said she's always here hammering away on us about issues. And I said, well, now, there's a novel idea. So we decided that I'd run for city council in the latter part of 1983. So in 1984, when I ran, we were having a good time. I said, if we don't win, at least we will force the city council to take seriously these issues. Well, much to my surprise, there were 9 candidates in the race. Not only did I win, I was a top vote getter. After I won, I thought, oh, heavens, what do I do now? And so the city manager at the time was George Hanbury. And he said, we'll send you off to Mr. Jefferson's school and we'll teach you about local politics. And that's really how it got started. To say the least, my first 4 years on city council was like a roller coaster. But I was reelected to a second term. And then before I ended my second term, the redistricting came about, which is very much similar to what we just went through. And there was a seat open up. 18th Senatorial District was drawn. And that's when Governor L. Douglas Wilder was in office. And the district ran from Portsmouth all the way to Halifax County.
I know, because you have a lot of coverage.
I had the longest senatorial district in Virginia. And so there was no one who thought that an African-American female, an African-American period, could run for a district that was as diverse as the 18th Senatorial District. You're talking about the melting pot. That's it. We have everything from shipyards to dairy farmers to tobacco growers. And you name it, it was in the 18th Senatorial District. But I decided I'd get in my car and I'd drive the district. And 26 times I went out and I met with people and I told them what I would offer. And they were convinced that I was going to do everything I could to represent them. So in fact, my challenger was one of the furniture owners, a businessman from Mecklenburg, lived right there in the heart of the district. And I took the district by 52% of the vote first time.
That's fantastic. What's the hardest thing about being a politician?
The time, even though I prefer state elected office to local. I enjoyed the time that I was in local office, but being in local government is 24/7. All day, every day, wherever people see you, they feel compelled to let you know what their issues are. And at the state level, even though it's one step removed, you can still have the same kind of impact. And I think having the local government knowledge is very helpful at the state level. And it's time consuming in a lot of ways. And the one thing that I dislike about the whole process is actually running.
So the campaigning part is the hardest part.
That's what representing people is not that difficult. You're right, Mamie. It's the actual campaign itself where you have to go out and raise huge sums of money.
Right.
So you're always on the phone, phoning for money. You're calling people, asking for money, and campaigns have gotten to be so costly. It is unbelievable. And so a lot of people think, what in the world are you all thinking? You have to go out and raise 100 times the money that you're getting paid just to campaign for office. But you're right, the campaign itself is a more difficult part.
Well, with the super PACs and so forth, and this is one of the things we talked about on Wednesday at the community forum given by the Urban League, we were talking about the whole idea of buying offices now. I mean, does it kind of feel like that even on the state and local level, that the one with the most toys wins?
I mean, ultimately, I think that it is not doesn't have as much of an impact on the state level as it does nationally, because I haven't seen, the super PACs come into play with statewide offices, but I haven't seen it as much when you go down to the district levels. But I think super PACs are an awful thing, because these are folks who can put together an ad, tell you a lie, and don't have to take responsibility for it because you don't know who they are.
Identify who they are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call if you'd like to speak with both Senator Louise Lucas or Senator Mamie Locke. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. So when you represent parts of Hampton Roads as well as other parts of the state. So when you're in session, do the two of you collaborate a lot, work together a lot? How did that work?
Every day. Our offices are right next door to each other.
We strategically located ourselves so that we could communicate. And that is a very important part of what we do. Oftentimes, we're so busy, we don't get to talk about all of the issues because we may be dealing with anywhere from 2,500 to 3,500 pieces of legislation each year. Even though that many pieces don't get passed, we still have to consider them during any session. And so when I don't get to talk to Senator Locke about an issue, when we go into the chamber and we vote and I look up and I see, her light's green. I'm voting against this bill. Why is she voting for it? I'll go and change my vote and I vote for it. And I said, now why did we do that?
But how do you prioritize what what is really important, what you're going to push for, and so forth each year as you go up to.
I listen to
Virginia.
the legislative packets of the city and county that I represent in terms of what their priorities are, and if I can support what they're doing, I will carry legislation, for them. And then I have my own issues that I think are very important. I am totally and absolutely opposed to the payday lending industry, and every year, even though I know that legislation is not going to pass,
still keep pushing
I still keep pushing it because I think that the folks who are impacted by that the most are folks who are in my district, and so as long as they exist, I'm going to keep pushing, that kind of legislation.
But then, and I want to piggyback on that for just a minute, Mamie, because, for example, Senator Miller was constantly pushing the law for restoration of rights. At some point, I guess you have to keep doing it because you really believe in it, but it must get frustrating.
It does get frustrating, but when these issues are so important to you and the people that you represent, and this bill is probably going to go through a whole lot of grief this year, you keep doing it because you believe in what you do.
Right.
Mm-hmm. How important is it for our community in particular, for everyone, but particularly the African American community, to really understand how the legislature works? Do you get frustrated that people don't understand what really happens in trying to put together a bill, Senator Lucas?
Yes, I do. And oftentimes, and it's because Senator Locke and I both have served at the local level, we have a feel for local and we have a feel for state. And of course, I ran for Congress. I came within 4 points of winning. I would have served at each level of government. But you get frustrated when people will think that the issues that are going on in Congress are the issues that she and I ought to be dealing with. Mm-hmm. And I get a call and tell me, look, I want you all, when you all go on the floor of Congress today, and I say, I'm sorry, I ran for Congress, but I'm not there. Or we'll have people to come to us and say, well, look, I think what you ought to do with the school board, or what I think you ought to do, and yada, yada, yada. And they think that we're still representing the issues at the local level.
Right.
My frustration is that oftentimes our constituents don't understand the difference between local, state, and national government, and what our roles and responsibilities are, and they are so different. And so that's one of the things. I find that I'm constantly having to educate people in terms of helping them to understand.
I am in Richmond. I am not in Washington.
Exactly. Exactly.
So is that a failure of our school system? Is it a failure of people just not paying attention? Where does that come from?
I think it's a little of both. That the basic structure of government isn't really getting through to people, that there is a difference between local, state, and national, and that at each one of those levels we're handling different types of issues, because I still get people, as Louise said, who are coming to me with some issues that are purely local, and they get frustrated when I say to them, unless you can give me how I can handle that legislatively at the state level, there's nothing I can do about that.
Let's talk to Yvonne, who is en route to Philadelphia. Hi, Yvonne. You're on the air.
Hi, Barbara. First of all, I want to thank you for having the show today to educate us. I'm driving to Philadelphia. I'm 75 miles out of Norfolk, listening on 90.1, and you guys are coming across clearly.
Fantastic. Thank
to
you.
the senators for the education.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate that. And enjoy your trip and have safe travel.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye. That's our new expansion. We're branching out, and so that is wonderful that people can still follow us all the way up. That is fantastic. I have to ask you, Senator Lucas, about the tolls because I have to ask you, tolls or taxes. Where are we? What do you think about the fact that the lawsuit has now been filed, et cetera? Where are we in that process?
Well, I said when we first got started that each of us, we are like the military, and we will deploy each branch of our services until we get this thing resolved. And so there's one group working on a lawsuit. There are those of us who are working on the legislative side of it. And because I'm on Senate Finance, I continue to hammer away and push to try to get some money in the budget so that we could defer the tolls until 2014, which would give Mamie and myself and our colleagues an opportunity to sit down as adults and talk about what kind of funding mechanisms we can find that would help to alleviate some of the burden on the constituents that we represent. At this point, there's nothing I'd like more than to say there will be no tolls, but because we think that there will be, we want to try to get those reduced to the lowest possible amount that we can. The only way we can do that is for us to sit down and talk about the different areas where we might be able to get 1/8 of a cent here, 1/4 of a cent here, until we can get maybe 2 cents in sales tax, gasoline tax, and then maybe, and I would think that we have to index the gasoline tax,
right,
so that we can come up with enough funding for transportation such that we don't have to use tolls as the standard by which we build roads and tunnels and bridges.
And that's the problem. The problem that we're facing is there's not a will in the legislature and right now in the governor's office to figure out how do you get a sustainable source of revenue for transportation. And that's why we're coming up with all of these gimmicks.
That's exactly right.
And that's all they are, is rather than bite the bullet and put everything on the table and say, let's look at the sales tax, let's look at the gasoline tax, let's look at tolls too. What will work best to help us sustain our transportation issues in the Commonwealth?
And it has to be a combination
you have the
of
Grover
things.
Norquist people who won't even let that discussion take place, because they've signed these no tax pledges.
So why did it seem then that last fall, when the whole plan came out and people finally started to realize, okay, it's going to cost me this much money out of my pocket, this was not something that just happened all of a sudden.
Oh, of course not.
So, but it was presented that way, and
well, I could tell you back 10, 12 years ago, Senator Locke and I both recall because we were there. There was legislation advanced that would have allowed us to have a 2 cent, or was it a 1 cent? 1 cent sales tax that would have put money in the transportation lockbox. What people didn't understand is that this money was going to be earmarked for transportation. And what I hear from a lot of people is, when you get our taxes, you do whatever you want to do with it. But this legislation was clearly marked for transportation.
Very specific for transportation.
It was for transportation. But for some reason, people don't read that legislation. I mean, even when it was a referendum for them to look at, people didn't understand what it said. They voted against it.
They listened to the sound bites.
Listen to the sound bites. And because we didn't get that sales tax passed then, now we're faced with the reality of tolls. And so if we could have gotten that sales tax passed then, we may still have had tolls, but I'm sure they would have been a whole lot less than what they are now.
Right.
What are your constituents then from the peninsula side of this saying about this whole issue?
Our major issue would be the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel, which is a parking lot just about every day now. And the concern is once you start tolling, then tolling will come to the HRBT. It's going to come to the Monitor Merrimack, and ultimately that's going to become the way to pay for transportation fixes, and that's what I keep telling constituents. If you don't watch what's happening now with the tolling situation, be assured it's coming to you soon.
Absolutely.
So the people in the western part of the state and so forth, I mean, are you having to fight with them also to get them to understand why if we can fix it here in Hampton Roads, it's going to have a ripple effect across the state, or do they not care?
Well, I think they do care, but I think it's difficult for them to see, understand, feel right now, because unfortunately what we find is that constituents don't respond to issues until it is right there in their face. Right.
And they don't have the transportation problems that we're having here in Hampton Roads or the problems in Virginia. Right.
Well, ladies, both of us, all three of us, were at the Act Now rally that was held this past Wednesday, and it was with Reverend Al Sharpton. We also had a community forum prior to that where we talked about some issues, and it was quite a gathering, I would say.
It was fantastic. Yes.
And the Urban League put on this event to try to get people to understand why it is so important to vote. Sure. We're going into a presidential election, and they wanted people to come together on that. I wanted to get your overall opinions of the event, and then I've got some clips of Al Sharpton that we can react to. So what did you think, Senator Lucas, overall?
I thought it was an outstanding forum. I mean, it was the rally of all rallies in this area, I think, for this season. Unfortunately, I was not there early enough to help to join Mamie on the panel because I was in Portsmouth opening up the President Barack Obama headquarters in Portsmouth. And so I know Senator Locke had one to open up over in Hampton as well, but I was opened up a little bit later. But when I got there, it was a gathering, the kind that you always hope to see when you have someone of Al Sharpton's caliber come to our area. And just the things he said, I thought was so enlightening, so inspiring, and so funny.
Yes, he really did have a great sense of humor.
The word that comes to mind for me is rousing. You know, it was a rousing event.
Yes.
And it was an opportunity not just for people to hear Reverend Sharpton, but also to get an understanding of what's important and why it's important. And it's my hope that that will be the last time that we see a gathering of that size. You know, that whenever there's the opportunity to talk about this issue, we should have that many people.
Absolutely.
You know, who are there.
I had the pleasure of serving as the moderator for the community forum that we had prior to his speech. And I think it really was good for the community to see. We had Senator Locke, obviously, and then we also had a gentleman by the name of Kobe Dillard, who is a Republican. And I think that some people in the audience were surprised to meet Kobe and to hear him speak about his perspective from a Republican perspective, and I thought that was a good thing for the community.
And interestingly, he said to me, he said, "Well, I'm glad Senator Lucas wasn't there because one of you was enough."
If you're just joining us, I'm Barbara Ham Lee, and my guests today are Virginia State Senators Mamie Locke and Louise Lucas. You can join our conversation at 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. If you have a question for either of our state senators, please give us a call, 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Okay, Reverend Sharpton was very specific about why it is so critical for us to vote this year. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
You know, you meet these that tell you, well, I got there because of my skills, or I got there because of my pedigree, or my education. First of all, you're not the first smart Negro in America. Black folk been smart a long time. You were able to take your smartness where others couldn't because people like the Urban League fought to open doors for you. Let's not ever forget that blacks was ready to play baseball before Jackie Robinson. Blacks was ready to be president before Obama. America just wasn't ready. So don't get in your highfalutin place and forget that it was some people that didn't have degrees, that didn't have the pedigree, that didn't have the background, but they went to the streets and sponsored you to where you are.
And that's what he was talking about in terms of why it is still critical for us every time to go to the polls.
Absolutely. And another thing that you know that kind of resonated with me is the fact that we have to be careful about who we elect at the local,
Right.
and the state, and the national level. And people oftentimes don't, I'd say, review, study, research the information so they can find out the backgrounds of these people. What do they stand for? Because he also said that we elect people who forget who elected them and why they're there.
Absolutely.
Right?
He
And
said it was important for you to look for what they stand. Are they standing for you?
Right.
Being the point.
Exactly.
And one of the things he said at the end of that particular segment was just because he said, even if you don't want to get involved, at least be grateful. Be grateful. And a long time ago, when I was a real professor, I read this book called "This Bridge Called My Back," and it was about individuals who have been involved in the civil rights movement, and it was their back that we crossed over. That was the bridge. And I think that it is unfortunate that today so many people have forgotten that bridge.
I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about the audience that's listening to us, and I know that there are some people out there, and they may agree or disagree with me, but they're thinking, you know what, when are they ever going to get past this whole civil rights thing? And when are they ever going to get, meaning black folks, when are we ever going to stop talking about the fact that people, died for us to be able to vote and why this is so important? But this is our heritage.
When we stop having voter suppression laws.
Exactly.
Being introduced in the legislature.
Exactly.
When we stop having individuals who tell us, that we're wearing race on our sleeve. Well, I wouldn't have to wear it on my sleeve if you didn't put it in my face every day.
Exactly.
And whereas some people will say that it's no longer an issue, I beg to differ.
Exactly.
It is still very much an issue in this country. And when it ceased to be an issue, then I'll stop talking about it.
In fact, you know what? Senator Locke said to you that she was a product of the power movement. I'm a product of the civil rights movement. And I can say to you, since the election of President Barack Obama, I have seen racism raise its ugly head in a way that I have not seen since we were marching during the days of civil rights.
Why do you think that is? Because there are a lot of people who reflect that same sentiment, that it seems like all of a sudden it's open season almost in terms of people being able to say things and act in ways that were not acceptable.
Well, if I might repeat something that Senator Miller said before her passing, it's unfortunate that we appear to be turning back to the inglorious days of Virginia's history when you look at just some of the kind of legislation that was introduced this year, and the fact that with losing just one of our members in the Senate last year during these campaigns, and Senator Locke says eloquently, campaigns have consequences. The consequence of last year's campaign was that there were 7 African Americans and women who held the powerful gavels in the standing committees in the Senate of Virginia. 7 of the 11 committees were chaired by African Americans and women. And with that election, just the loss of 1 seat, all that power now has been turned into the hands of all white males, all Republicans. There is no African American, there is no woman who is a chair of any committee in the Senate.
In 2012.
In 2012.
So it really does feel like we're going backwards. Let's go to the phones. We've got a lot of people want to talk with you all. Jeannie joins us from Hampton. Hi, Jeannie. You're in the air.
Hi. Listen, the traffic's finally moving, so I'm going to be real quick. I live in Hampton. I volunteer with a group called Empower Hampton Roads, and I'm the chair of the Transportation Task Force. And I am really concerned about these tolls. And if there's a toll slapped on the HRBT, it's going to cut down on my traveling back and forth.
Sure.
Because I'm a retired woman on a fixed income. So I would just like to hear Mamie's comment on that.
Okay, thank you, Jeannie, for the call.
Jeannie, one of the things I said earlier was that's why we needed to pay very close attention to what's going on with the tolls that are being proposed for the Midtown Tunnel and the Downtown Tunnel. Because if we allow that to go unanswered, then the next step will be to toll the HRBT and the Monitor Merrimack. And that instead of addressing very concretely ways in which we can find a sustainable source of revenue for transportation in the Commonwealth, that's why we rely on these gimmicks. These gimmicks of borrowing our way out of the transportation problems, naming bridges, naming rights for bridges as a way of paying for transportation, and finally tolling. So, instead of not talking about the sales tax or the gasoline tax, let's put that on the table too.
Okay, thank you, Jeannie, for your call. Lynn joins us from Newport News. Hi, Lynn, you're on the air.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a possible suggestion about raising money for transportation. I've often thought that the 0.9% issue on the gasoline tax doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And my suggestion is, why don't we, in terms of sales tax in the state of Virginia or even nationally, round everything up to the closest nickel, just every purchase. Then it's not a per gallon tax, but nobody's going to notice up to 4 pennies on a purchase. I also, in terms of elections, think that Election Day in November should be a national holiday where we actually celebrate our right to vote. And if it were a national holiday, I think it would make it easier for people to get to the polls for whom that may be a struggle currently.
Okay.
And
That's a great
see what you
idea.
think
That's
after
fantastic.
afterwards.
All right, Lynn, thanks so much for the call. A national holiday for
I like that.
I like that idea.
on the day to vote. That is a good idea. Now, one of the things that Reverend Sharpton talked about, and something that's been ginning up in conversation all over the place, are these voter ID laws and the changes that have been going on with that. Let's listen to Reverend Sharpton first, and we'll respond on the other side.
Clinton and Bush and Carter and all of them ran. We used our ID. Now all of a sudden Obama run for re-election, you need a government photo ID. Well, why do we need a different ID now? We got to avoid fraud. But where has the fraud been? We did the research. There's been 0.0003% fraud, less than 1% fraud. Voter ID is a solution looking for a problem, not a problem in need of a solution. The only voter fraud is the fraud of voter ID.
He does have a way with words, doesn't he?
Yes, he does.
What do you think about this voter ID?
I think it's a way to suppress vote. There's absolutely no question about it, because there are going to be a lot of people who will not be able to get that kind of an ID because they're not going to be able to have a birth certificate. There are a lot of senior citizens who don't have birth certificates. They were born at a time when recordation was not exactly. They had midwives. And there's a whole new midwifery kind of a program now. But they don't have these birth certificates. And you're going to have the birth certificate in order to get some of these identifications.
Well, one of the other things that they bring up, too, is that there's a cost to obtaining your
The
birth
new poll
certificate
tax.
and so forth. And so, therefore, as
The new poll tax.
New poll tax.
Exactly.
You know, that was one of the major issues that we fought against this entire legislative session, was the voter identification bills. And they ran the gamut from you can use a concealed weapons license as a form of ID, you know, which made very little sense to me, you know, but you couldn't use your voter registration card that you get when you register to vote.
So what is the purpose
as one
of
of
getting
your
the card?
identification?
Exactly.
Right. Ultimately, that was included, and we weakened the bills considerably. But they all started out as photo ID bills, and one bill actually specifically said it had to be a driver's license or a passport.
That's correct.
Yeah. And, you know, as Louise mentioned, you know, there are a lot of elderly people who simply don't have birth certificates.
That's correct.
So how are you going to prove, you know,
Plus, there was a
who you
new
are and
study
so
that
forth?
came out that said that most people who would need to obtain these photo IDs live 10 or more miles away from the agency that gives the IDs.
Right,
and so,
right.
so there are all kinds of barriers.
I mean, we're going back, you know, to the time when we had to prove, you know, there were all of these obstacles.
Yes.
And I think I mentioned at the forum that when I registered to vote in Mississippi, they had dual registration. You had to register in the city where you lived, and you also had to register in the county seat. The only fortunate thing for me was that I lived in the county seat. But in a lot of the rural communities, you know, individuals lived anywhere from 25 to 50 miles away from the county seat.
Correct.
So, which meant that they couldn't vote in federal elections if they didn't register at that level. So we're going back to that same period of time where we're putting in all of these obstacles to people voting.
When we need to be moving forward.
Right.
Margaret joins us from Hampton. Hi, Margaret. You're on the air.
Hi. I have two issues. The first is I'm wondering if the senators know what's happening with the uranium mining situation, which in my opinion would be a huge environmental and health disaster for this area. And the second one is I wonder why the people supporting Obama don't publicize the environmental issue more. I mean, the NOA just came out with studies showing that there was a link between global warming and these huge climatic changes. And Governor Romney has clearly stated that he's going to decrease regulations on business, and the Republicans have made it clear that they're going to decrease government regulations on pollution of corporations, which will be catastrophic for the environment, in my opinion.
Okay, Margaret, let's hear from our legislators. Thank you so much for your call. Senator Lucas?
Well, I agree that we need to do more to get our message clearer in the public arena. But I can say to you that in terms of this uranium mining, there has been any number of individuals to come to lobby with us, wanting our support for uranium mining. And I can personally say that I'm opposed to it, as are a number of my constituents. And Senator Locke and I, we've gone out and we've toured the sites, and Senator Locke can speak for herself, but I personally could not lend my support to uranium mining.
Okay.
There are any number of studies that have been done, the most recent being the Academy of Science study, which basically said that there are problems associated with uranium mining. And at this point, I too am personally opposed to opening up Virginia to that. But to get back to the issue of the exposure of issues about the environment, the president has done a phenomenal job as it relates to protecting the environment. And that's one of the things when I talk about what change is. That's one of the issues that I mentioned. And I think that it's our collective responsibility to make sure that people understand that this is an environmental president.
Exactly.
Okay. We got one more clip from Reverend Al I want to get in real quickly before we run out of time for today's show. Let's play that clip.
When you cut Medicare for our seniors, I said it before, I say it again, this election is not just about Obama, it's about your mama. They want to rearrange the whole social dynamic of this country. So no one should have to beg you to vote. No one should have to beg you to get involved.
No one should have. It's about your mama.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. It really is. And when we open up the President Barack Obama headquarters in Portsmouth this week, one of the things that I said to those people who had gathered, and it was a packed room, I was so glad to see so many people there. I said, this election is personal. Personal for you, personal for me, for our children, our grandchildren, and I have a 1-year-old now, great-grandson. My youngest of my 3 great-grandchildren. And I said, this is about the future. And so to not vote your own personal interests is not to be concerned about your own children. How can you not do that? I mean, how can you do that? And if you look at at Mitt Romney's record and you look at what this president has done for the nation, it's a no-brainer.
Well, now and that's your opinion. There are some people out there, but Reverend Sharpton's point was no matter who you vote for,
that you need
make
to
sure
vote.
that you need to get out and vote.
Right. And I know that this is about my mama, because my mother turns 85 this year and has any number of health, issues. So Medicare matters for us. And I think that, I always vote my interests.
Yes.
And to make sure that not just what is important to me, but also what's important to my family, what's important to my community, what's important to my neighbors, that those are the issues that we need to focus on. And I always say elections have consequences, and if you don't go out and vote, then you have to deal with the consequences.
Exactly.
Let's see if we can get one more call in very, very quickly. Hugh joins us from Charles City, Virginia. Hi, Hugh. You're on the air. Hello, Hugh. Are you there? Okay, Hugh is not there. Let's see if we can go to Vaughn in Williamsburg. Hi, Vaughn. You're on the air.
Hi, Ms. Lee. Senator Locke, Senator, I appreciate you all, Senator Lucas, I appreciate you all's leadership in the state. I was wondering if we could steer the conversation back to some state issues, particularly the tying transportation into land use. Mm-hmm. Dr. Locke, you know how much I care about housing. But I wanted to hear, in the last session, we had a number of laws, especially dealing with the the affordable dwelling unit peeled back, and I was wondering if there might be some daylight for working that type of control back into the legislature coming up.
Okay, Vaughn, we got about a minute and a half left, so let's let her have an answer, or Senator Locke. So.
See, I know Vaughn. Vaughn's one of my former students.
Oh, okay.
And he's always at the Housing Commission meetings. I think that it's very important that we move more in the direction of local governments having a little bit more control over their own land use, because they know best, how to use the resources for their community. And I think that being in a state where localities are the stepchildren of the state, it becomes extraordinarily difficult for localities to make the changes and to put forward the vision that they know that they need for their community. So I'm hoping that we can get back to that kind of discussion, not just in the Housing Commission, but also legislatively in the 2013 session.
Okay, I want to say to the other callers that are on the line, we are so sorry we don't have time to get to you today, but if you want to send us a comment, you can go to our website, which is anotherviewradio.org, and leave us a message, and we'll try to get an answer for you. In 30 seconds, I want to give each of you a chance of 10 seconds. What's the last thing you'd like to say to the audience today?
I would like for the listening audience to pay attention to the 2013 session of the General Assembly, and certainly give us a call with any concerns that they have, and we would be delighted to try to work with them.
Senator Louise Lucas, thank you so much for joining us today on Another View. Senator Locke?
Ladies and gentlemen, elections have consequences. So if you don't want to live with the consequences of not voting, then it is imperative that you vote not just this November, but in every election from the local level to the federal level. They are important.
And State Senator Mamie Locke. Thank you, ladies, so much for joining me today, and we'll be right back. And welcome back. He writes to convey a message of hope to the reader. Over the past 25 years, Napoleon Byrd has composed more than 200 poems designed to inspire people of all ages. At age 81 years young, the Portsmouth native is an inspiration himself, beginning his new career as a writer, poet, and lyricist about the same time that most people look forward to retirement. Our Lisa Godley tells us why Napoleon Byrd is flying high with his second career.
As you meditate, be kind, be gentle, show a great need, manifest your loyalty in
Napoleon
a word.
Byrd has always had a desire to inspire, whether it was his students as an educator or his second career as a poet.
I write poems to excite people, to motivate people, to endear them to strive for the very best in themselves, and don't settle for less than the best. That's how I attempt to convey my poems to people.
At 81 years young, Byrd is currently working on his third book of poetry, which he says is written from his own life experiences and his relationships with people.
My notion is first to create an idea. After I create the idea, I go to the next notion of thought process. What am I going to write about? How am I going to write? To whom I'm going to write about, and when and where has this place when I begin writing. And after I write, I take into consideration all aspects of my mindset. One day it may be about dreaming, it may be about scheming, it may be about wasting your time, it may be about did you go for the prize. So it's in that frame of mind that I attempt to write. And my notion is to start at a point, and I stay at that point until I finish. And usually I write a poem, and it takes me about 30 to 45 minutes to write a poem. And in that span of time, I attempt to have a purpose, an intro, ongoing process, climax, and mums are the greatest. That's it. That's how I complete my poem. They raise and nurture you. They treasure God's gift in each of you. They implant the gift of security in you. They measure each sibling on
He dedicated
their
his
own
second
merits.
book, Meditations of Life, to the love of his life, his late wife, Margaret.
That's the person who gave me the inspiration to attempt to write. That was one of my areas that I really enjoyed writing because she was the inspiration in my life. Leaning and learning. I have crutches to balance my stubborn walk. I have braces to sturdy my gait. I have maps to guide me along the way. I have a mind to alert me how to stay on the path of learning day by day.
Bird has this advice for anyone who says they're too old to start something new, particularly if they're interested in a second career as a writer.
Learning never stops. Learning is an ongoing process. It's a lifelong process. The more you learn, the more you want to learn, the more you should learn. And that's why my notion is that the older your age is not a factor in your learning process. If you want to go beyond your set process, you have to read each day. You have to reread because you must have the dictionary, you must have a flow of knowledge. And age is not a factor. So my advice to any person in the senior status, whether you're in the 60s, 70s, 80s, or otherwise, my advice is to go for the prize, seek a goal, and reach that goal. You can motivate yourself very easily by going a step higher and do this on a daily basis, and it will help you to reach some of your goals later in life.
For Another View, I'm Lisa Godley.
He says age is not a factor, so get out there and follow your dreams. I love that. Time now for things to view and do in Hampton Roads.
You will be my Saturday love.
Come watch as young male football players get expert coaching and instruction from professional football players. It's the Charlie Brown RFK football camp led by former Washington Redskin downtown Charlie Brown. Participants will gain experience including drills and technique in all areas of defensive and offensive football. The camp is tomorrow, Saturday, July 21st, beginning at 8 a.m. at Bayside High School in Virginia Beach. For more information, call area code 803-479-3635. You're invited to attend the CD release party for the gospel album Passionate Praises by local publisher, editor, and entrepreneur DDG. This is Ms. G's first album, and the party is also tomorrow, Saturday, July 21st, from 2 until 4 at the Gourmet Breakfast Place on Old George Washington Highway in Chesapeake. Call 606-2662 for details. Looking for a fun and safe way to spend some time with your family? Why not attend the Tidewater Gardens Community Health and Fun Day? It's Friday, July 27th from noon until 3 at Tidewater Gardens, Walker Street in Norfolk. There will be food, health screenings and information, and family-centered games and activities. Call 314-2054 to find out more. There's a free movie screening and conversation with the cast next Saturday, July 28th at 11 a.m. The movie is called Ms. Nappy Combs, Her Hair, Her Journey, created by Poetic Justice. This film features women who have embraced their natural hair and looks at how this decision has affected their lives. The movie and conversation will be held at the Indian River Library on Old Greenbrier Road in Chesapeake. Call 202-3264 for more information. And finally, if you like to sing, then the Virginia Chorale Society may become your creative outlet. They are holding voice auditions on August 4th at Trinity Lutheran Church, River Road in Newport News. Auditions are by appointment only. You do not have to be professionally trained. To schedule your audition, call 356-7858. These and other events are on our website, anotherviewradio.org. And please remember to sign up for our eView newsletter, a once-a-week reminder of upcoming programs. Thank you for spending some time with us today. For producer Lisa Godley, audio engineer Perry Smith, Les Ashley Taylor, who answered our phones, I'm Barbara Ham Lee. Let's get together next Friday at noon for Another View. The hour just flies by.
Well, you know, I'm thinking it's because the two of us did it together. I wish she had been with me when I did John Frederick this morning. I might not have stuck my